Ahoj, moje jméno je Petr Holík a tohle je Nenásilný podcast s Petrem a Petrem. Dneska jsem tu jenom já sám jako Petr, protože tu mám dneska hosta, je to Jaredem Finkelstein z Spojených států amerických, který je tady jako trenér na návštěvě u nás v Brně. A takže tahle ta epizoda bude v angličtině, pokud byste náhodou nerozuměli nebo vám angličtina nevyhovovala, tak nám napište, dejte vědět, můžeme udělat přepis téhleté epizody, ale já už teďka přepínám do anglického jazyka. So, Jared, welcome. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
I haven't introduced you at all. I just said that you are from States. So, is there something that you would like to tell people about you so they get to know you better? I mean, in a way of who you are and how did you get to NVC or stuff like this?
Yeah, wow. There's a lot to that question because I guess there's a lot to me. But like you said, my name is Jared, and I live in the United States. I grew up on the East Coast, and I currently live on the West Coast in California. And I've been practicing and teaching nonviolent communication for about 10 years now. And before I started doing that, I was a classroom teacher with early childhood education, classroom teacher for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. Nice. And before that, I had a lot of different jobs and a lot of different false starts of different careers.
Well, that's interesting that you say about your experience from the classrooms, because that's one topic that could be also interesting for us to talk about. But the topic for this episode, what I would like it to be, is NVC, nonviolent communication. And I had a workshop with you a few days back, and we were talking a lot about what is the essence of this practice and what is more of a form of this practice and how they are related together. And so if that would be interesting for you, I think we could dig deeper into this topic, essence and form.
Absolutely. For me, that's a really meaningful distinction. And the idea of it was sort of first passed down to me from a colleague of mine reiterating her experience of a training that Marshall Rosenberg himself, the founder of nonviolent communication, led in, I believe it was Sweden, where he was working with a bunch of other trainers, so sort of an advanced session. And he posed to all of them that there was no such thing as nonviolent communication, that nonviolent communication did not exist. But that if it did exist, it would exist in these 5 elements. And one of them is like the consciousness of nonviolence and really orienting yourself towards seeing the world as a beautiful place, as life being precious and being so enamored with life itself that thoughts of violence or even considering doing harm to something would be a foreign concept to you, because why would you do something harmful to something so beautiful?
So that would be the essence of like non-violence for you, to be just deeply connected to life and its essence and see the beauty of life and perceive it as so precious that you just can't do harm to it.
Yeah, very much so. I think that's the word non-violence comes from, my understanding, a Sanskrit word called ahimsa. And that ahimsa is sort of a description of that state of being. And so, yeah, I think in its essence, nonviolence aspires towards seeing life as the sanctity of life as so precious that it wouldn't even occur to you to do anything to be harmful to it.
You said that ahimsa refers to a state of being. Are you often finding yourself in that state of being, or is it? Can you recognize it? Is it like a state that you can say, okay, now I'm living it, now I'm feeling it? Is it something like that?
It's a wonderful question. I'm not sure. I mean, it certainly, I don't operate consciously in most of my life thinking about doing harm to things. But I also think the world we live in is sort of detached itself from nature in some ways. We've really built a lot of ways of thinking and societal norms that I'm lulled into a state of unawareness in relationship to, and so it makes it hard to recognize if I'm in this state of ahimsa that we're talking about and how often I operate in it. But I do experience the form of nonviolent communication, sort of the practice of it, as training or as a method or a way of thinking or a way of a practice for my thoughts to steer me more in that direction, to keep me in a state of noticing the beauty and the life being expressed in people's behaviors when otherwise I might be judgmental or critical or frightened or thinking about doing harm towards them.
It's nice. If we stay for a little bit more at the essence of nonviolent communication, do you have some more thoughts or words for it, or definitions maybe? If somebody asks you, what is the essence? Do you talk about ahimsa or do you explain otherwise? Because I'm just asking because a lot of our listeners are not experienced NVC practitioners, and this podcast may be interesting for them just to see what we are trying to achieve with this practice.
Sure. Another word I like to use is interdependence, and that's become a little bit more popular term. But this idea of the interconnectedness and interdependence of all of life, that it's impossible to sort of remove yourself from this collective weave that we're a part of. And I think this is a contrast to the idea of that I'm independent from you or that I'm completely dependent on you, but rather some interrelatedness. And so I think that's part of the essence too, is recognizing that interdependence and finding how your unique space is in that larger tapestry, and then having some reverence and understanding of the interrelatedness of everything. So, that then makes nonviolence some effort to live harmoniously in this interdependence, like understanding the whole, understanding how your actions affect others and how other actions affect you, and caring for something larger than just yourself.
I can imagine this is more like a philosophy behind all this. It's a way of life. I can imagine this is a decision to make. Like, I want to live my life at those principles, at those beliefs.
Yeah, sometimes it's said in nonviolent communication that like it operates on 3 levels. And on one level, it operates within ourselves. Like, how do I understand interdependence and ahimsa and being in this state of compassion inside myself? How do I recognize my own mattering and my own value and the preciousness of my own life? And then the next is how it affects relationships between people. Like, how do you and I connect? How do we navigate our differences? How do we understand the cause and effect of our relationship? And how do we do that in some sort of way where there's a quality of our connection that is compassionate and generous, and we are giving to one another and serving life in that way? And then the third level is sort of societal and structural. Like, what systems can we create and operate and organize under that are also the most conducive towards this generous spirit of contributing to life that we believe individuals are wired to do. And so, the practice then invites work inside of yourself and in your relationships and how we organize.
So you started talking about practice. So if I decide, if I go for it, if I want to live nonviolence, nonviolent communication is a practice that supports this idea, that supports my goal in this way. Would you agree with this?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So how do we do it, or how do you do it in nonviolent communication? How does it practice look like that supports these goals that we can have in the world?
Well, I think often it starts if someone wants to be a student of nonviolent communication specifically. It starts with finding other practitioners or books or CDs or podcasts such as this and getting just exposed to the ideas, and it begins as sort of a mental exercise. And then I think as it becomes more integrated in yourself, you're more familiar with it, it becomes ideas and maybe even language that informs how you communicate with your loved ones, how you think about your relationship with your friends and your colleagues. And then I think, nonviolence in general, there are activists all over the world who are all doing their best to make the world a better place. And it's a much more complicated question, I think, how one turns their nonviolent communication practice into having real influence in the world. But the idea is that as people assume influence and have the means in their disposal to influence their lives and the systems that they work in, that they prioritize a power with attitude, that we're trying to work with people to make life more wonderful, rather than using the power we accumulate over people and using punishment and reward as motivators to get people to do what we want them to do. So it's nuanced, and I think it's complex, but anyone at any point who wants to embrace nonviolence is going to be wrestling with it on, I think, those three levels, internally within yourself and between you and the people you know, and then how you want to influence the world.
Is it something during your normal day, I would say, is it something you decide, or you do thoughtfully, like you tell yourself, now I'm doing nonviolent communication? Or because many people, when I am teaching workshops, and I think you have the same experience, they talk about it in a way, now I'm using NVC and now I'm not using NVC. Yeah. So do you have it similar, or do you perceive it differently?
I have a lot of tenderness to that experience. I think there's a journey. There's a journey to being to learning and being exposed to new concepts and new ideas and different ways of thinking. And especially when you're trying to change habits in your life that are deeply ingrained and for the most part have been quite life-serving until they're not. So I think that the language or the idea of using NVC or doing NVC, that's very much a common experience of people who are first exposed to these ideas and are trying to integrate it. And certainly at some point in my journey of practicing and studying nonviolent communication, a lot of the basic tenets have become very integrated. And I think of it a lot less as something that I do or trying to do, and much more of a way of viewing life that I just try to maintain.
Is there something you say to people when they say, hey, I'm trying to use NVC and sometimes I'm failing and sometimes it's good? Is there some advice, or what do you tell people who come with this to?
It really depends where I hear them say that. If it's over tea, I might offer some empathy. I might just, let them know that I'm hearing they're really wanting to be more choiceful in their relationships, and they're wanting more space inside of themselves to respond rather than react to the stimuli that they encounter. And in a workshop where I'm given a little bit more of a luxury to explain myself, I would invite inquiry about what we mean by work. I don't experience the consciousness of nonviolent communication as something that is successful or unsuccessful. In fact, when I'm in the most pain or disappointed or disconnected from another person or from myself, that's often when I most want to inject these ideas of life is attempting to satisfy needs, and that I'm attempting to satisfy needs. And then compassion in this moment might be a way of getting to the heart of the matter. So did NVC work in that moment? I don't know. I can't say that I'm now in relationship with the person who has upset me in a connected way. But does that mean I stop thinking about ahimsa, and I stop thinking about nonviolence? I stop thinking about trying to connect with myself compassionately or that other person? I don't think so. I think that's the moment where we most want to practice our nonviolence. So I think we have to look closely at what we mean by it working. And think more about what is the orientation towards life that I want to manifest and embody every moment.
So what you say, as I understand it, is we need to maybe not talk so much about working or using, and go to the essence, to the purpose of the practice.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like how you said that. The essence is a consciousness, and the consciousness is neither working or not working. It's neither successful or unsuccessful. It's neither something I do or I don't. It's the way I view life.
A question came into my mind, because I said earlier that I was at your workshop, but that's not the only place where we hang out. We also hit some bars and have a drink and have a good time. I'd like to ask you, if you are in this mode, in this state, just having a drink with friends in a bar, if you remember last night when we were in a bar, for example, how was NVC essence alive in you at those moments?
Well, I think, sadly, a lot of people study NVC or come to NVC because there's a relationship of theirs that they're not as connected with, and they would like to reskill themselves or empower themselves to be more capable of staying connected and repairing that relationship, which is great. I have a lot of delight imagining people finding this work to improve the quality of relationships in their lives. But again, getting back to this essence, this consciousness, like seeing life as a beautiful thing and being so enamored by life that you wouldn't want to do any harm to it. I've experienced that frequently with friends and having a drink at a pub or tea or at a coffee shop or playing games with friends or however. And I think this idea of adding that level of awareness and appreciation to how life is being satisfied when we're enjoying one another's company also enhances one's ability to be in the essence of NVC. In workshops, this is sometimes said as like, we need to empathize with our joy as much as our pain. So to answer your question, yeah, when I'm hanging out with friends, like I want to be as grateful and as connected to what life qualities this is satisfying in that moment. And I mean, right now, you and I are sitting across from one another recording a podcast, and there are a tremendous number of life qualities that are alive in me that I'm celebrating the potential satisfaction of. The idea of other people hearing this and contributing to them, the idea of just having a connected moment with you. It's also just sort of fun. I mean, I'm having fun right now, and I don't want to lose track of that. So in this way, NVC or nonviolence essence is being tracked and expressed in this very moment.
Yeah, it's nice that you say that, because I think that quite often NVC is connected with like conflict resolution or conflict management or unpleasant situation where I'm feeling unpleasant and I want to change something, and I use NVC to make that happen. And I'm glad I'm hearing this from you, that it's alive all the time, even in the good moments, because we in our first episode of this podcast, actually in a demo, we talked about expressing gratitude, and it wasn't just a tool for change. It's useful as it is.
Yeah, gratitude is gratitude. Gratitude is being grateful, right? And then it's grateful for what? And what part of my life, what part of being alive do I want to put some of my awareness on right now, so that I have a sense of this interdependence, a sense of being a part of the world, a part of the universe.
I'd like to now talk more about the form, or a little bit, because when we are talking about the essence, I think I can just tell myself, okay, I like the essence, I'll just do it. But I can imagine it's not only the choice. It's not like I tell myself, now I'll live nonviolence from now on, and that's it. And nonviolent communication gives us form and practice to support this purpose, to support our goals. How does it work? Why do you think that NVC forms support this nonviolence essence?
Well, I think it has to do with differentiation and exposing yourself to different concepts that when you hold the tension between the two of them, a greater sense of choice manifests in you. Mm-hmm. And that can be how you think about something. Like, am I thinking about my evaluation, my interpretation of the look on your face, or am I just looking at the look at your face? Like, that would be a distinction between an observation and an evaluation. Mm-hmm. And once I've sort of done that mechanical bit of thinking in my mind, it opens up choices about word selection. If I want to talk to you about the look on your face, do I want to just refer to the look on your face and say, right now I see that you're looking at me, and when you look at me this way, da-da-da-da-da? Or do I want to articulate my interpretation of the look on your face? Like, you look upset, you look angry, you look happy. Having that dexterity and those options available in my thinking for the desired effect of connecting with you compassionately and having you connect with me compassionately, that's how the form presents options for us. And, it can be heady, I think, at times. I think it can be a lot of thinking. And that's sometimes why people talk about doing NVC or using NVC, because at first it takes a lot of rigor to get out of maybe a habit of just often describing things as with your interpretation or with the language of your interpretation. But with time, it becomes more integrated, and you realize you have a lot more flexibility.
So if I practice, if I use the forms, if I train in a way, I get more choice in life.
That is the hope,
yeah.
And that has very much been my experience, that my training has led to a lot more of a personal sense of agency and options and choice, and more connection to this inherent choice I have. That's certainly been one of my things I'm grateful for my practice.
How does it feel when you have this choice? Because is it can you recognize it? Are there times that you have a feeling in your body that like embodies this choice, this presence of the practice?
Sometimes honestly it's overwhelming to be, it creates uncertainty, and other times it's euphoric because what otherwise is sort of like tense in my body and feels very constrained and restricted expands when I realize there's a third way or a fourth way or a new option for handling this. I'll give you an example. Recently I had a sort of difficult situation where I live, and I found myself caught in between a power struggle of my landlord and her son who lives in the house. And it was an uncomfortable situation to be in, and I noticed for a couple of days like there was some tightness in my stomach, and my fists were sort of clenched, and I was upset about it. And I didn't yet write a note to my landlord or her son because of all of that tension inside of me. I was afraid I would say or do something from that kind of energy or that kind of anger that might make the situation worse. And then, I gave myself sort of the space to really think about it and to invite some of the principles and practices of NVC into it, and imagine what was important to my landlord, imagine what was important to her son. And some of that imagining wove its way into the letter I eventually wrote that also articulated what was important to me. And it ended much more satisfying. And so I think that journey of that inner work before actually composing this letter and moving what before my practice would have been a very reactive and probably aggressive email about how upset I was that I was stuck between the two of them, became a much more generous and considerate letter towards them, an expression of myself, and the feedback I got was that was well received. So I think that's sort of a practical way that this expansive sense of options lives inside of me from time to time.
Okay, thanks for sharing the specific story. It's nice to hear. Okay, so we've talked about the essence of nonviolent communication. We talked a little bit about the form and how it supports us in living this essence. I think we touched the topic that we wanted to, and this could be the end of the episode. Do you have something else you want to add to the topic form and essence of NVC?
Yeah, I do. I just want to say a little bit more about the essence that if you really embrace it as a consciousness, like we've been talking about, like a way of viewing life. The other things that Marshall said at that training in Sweden so many years ago that I think is worth mentioning to your listeners is that if I find orienting myself in this consciousness is what I would like to do, then what I want that consciousness to inform is how I think, how I speak, how I communicate, and how I recognize power that I possess and how I choose to use that power. And so in this way, nonviolence manifests like first as an orientation towards life, and then it spills out from there in its essence in how I interact with the world and how I have influence in the world. And I would very much hold all of that as the essence of what this practice wants us to stay in touch with when we're doing these very mechanical form things like distinguishing observations from evaluations or feelings from thoughts or needs from strategies and requests from demands. So I thought I'd just lay that out a little bit more succinctly so that our listeners can chew on that and consider it.
Okay, thank you. I think that's nice ending for this for this podcast. And thank you for being here.
Well, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Já přepnu zase do češtiny, tohle je konec téhleté epizody s Jaredem Finkelsteinem a my určitě nahráme ještě aspoň jednu epizodu, protože máme další témata, o kterých si chceme povídat, takže laďte Nenásilný podcast a budeme se na vás těšit zase příště s Jaredem nebo s někým jiným. Zatím ahoj.